Mrs. Park looks beautiful tonight.
She's quiet, though. Won't lie.
3 years, and I still don't know what she's thinking. Don't move. Impressive, but violence from a woman? That's desperation.
What did you...
이제 그만해.
The annual charity gala was the most important social event in Bususan. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. 400 guests filled the hall, dressed in expensive gowns and tailored suits. Soft classical music floated through the air. Laughter and quiet business conversations blended together under golden lights. Kira Bennett stood beside one of the marble pillars, wearing an emerald silk gown that hugged her figure. A diamond choker rested at her throat, catching the light with every movement. She looked calm, almost distant, as if she were observing the room instead of being part of it. Across the ballroom, her husband, Jin-Woo Park, held a glass of champagne. He was Bususan's most feared crime lord, though tonight he appeared like any other powerful businessman. His dark suit was perfectly cut. His expression was controlled and unreadable. For 3 years, he had believed his American wife was quiet, harmless, and useful for appearances. She attended events. She smiled politely. She never interfered. Then everything changed. The knife was only 3 inches from Kira's throat when her hand moved. There was no scream from her. No hesitation. She twisted sharply to the side, her fingers locking around the attacker's wrist. In one fast motion, she pivoted her body and slammed his arm against the marble pillar behind her. The crack of breaking bone echoed through the ballroom. The assassin screamed. Guests froze. Glasses shattered as people dropped them in shock. Someone gasped loudly. Blood dotted the lower half of Kira's emerald gown where the knife had grazed her skin before she moved. But she did not look afraid. She released the man only after his body collapsed to the floor. The entire movement had taken less than 3 seconds. Jin-Woo's champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips. He stared across the ballroom at his wife, unable to move. He had seen trained men fight. He had seen violence before. But this was different. This was precise, controlled, efficient. Kira stood straight, smoothing her torn gown as if nothing unusual had happened. The room buzzed with whispers. Before anyone could fully process what they had witnessed, Marcus Song stepped forward from the crowd. He was Bususan's second most powerful crime lord, known for his ambition and sharp temper. His expensive suit and confident smile barely hid the anger in his eyes. Impressive, Marcus said loudly in English, making sure everyone heard him. But violence from a woman is still just desperation. A few nervous laughs scattered through the crowd. Marcus stepped closer to Kira. His gaze was mocking. Without asking permission, he placed his hand on her waist, his fingers sliding possessively over her hip. Let me explain how things work in Korea, he continued. Women stand behind their men. Quiet. The ballroom went silent. Kira's reaction was immediate. She caught Marcus's wrist mid-touch. Her grip tightened, and she applied pressure to a specific point near the nerve cluster of his hand. His confident expression vanished. In seconds, Marcus dropped to his knees in front of everyone. A sharp gasp spread through the hall. Kira leaned slightly toward him. When she spoke, it was not in English. It was flawless Korean. Touching without permission has consequences, she said calmly. In any culture. Her accent was perfect, clear, sharp. Marcus's face turned pale as the pain increased. The crowd stared in disbelief. For 3 years, Kira Bennett had never spoken Korean in public. Many had assumed she did not understand the language at all. And for the record, she added quietly, I stand beside my husband, not behind him. She released his wrist. Marcus stumbled backward, cradling his hand, humiliation written across his face. The power in the room shifted. Whispers grew louder. Shock turned into something else, respect. Kira adjusted her gown again and walked slowly toward the balcony doors. Every eye followed her. She did not rush. She did not look back. Across the ballroom, Jin-Woo felt something unfamiliar stir inside his chest. It was not anger. It was not embarrassment. It was realization. The woman he had married 3 years ago for convenience, the quiet American who smiled and stayed silent, did not exist. That woman had been a mask. The real woman had just broken a trained killer's arm and humiliated his greatest rival in front of the entire criminal elite of Bususan. She had spoken Korean he had never once heard her use. How long had she understood everything said around her? How long had she been watching? Jin-Woo slowly set his champagne glass down on a nearby table. His second-in-command, Minjun, appeared at his side. "Sir," Minjun said carefully, "should we follow her?" Jin Woo did not answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the balcony where Kira now stood alone against the night skyline. "Yes," he said finally, his voice low and controlled. "Make sure she gets home safely." Minjun nodded. Then Jin Woo added, "And find out everything." "Everything, sir?" "Everything about my wife." He turned his gaze back to the balcony, where Kira stood looking out over the city lights. The woman he thought he knew had disappeared in 3 seconds. In her place stood someone dangerous. Someone intelligent. Someone powerful. For the first time in 3 years, Jin Woo Park understood one simple truth. He did not know his wife at all. And he intended to change that. The penthouse sat 42 floors above Bususan, surrounded by glass walls that revealed the city's glowing skyline. The lights below looked calm and distant, but inside the apartment the air felt tight and charged. Kira stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, her back to the door. She had changed out of the torn emerald gown. Now she wore simple black silk pajamas. Her natural curls were loose around her shoulders. She did not turn when Jin Woo entered. He closed the door quietly behind him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "How long?" he asked finally. His voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the tension beneath it. Kira remained facing the city. "How long what? How long have you spoken Korean?" She turned then. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were sharp and fully alert. "Since the day after our wedding," she answered. In Korean. The words hit him harder than he expected. "You've understood everything," he said slowly. "Yes." "For 3 years." "Yes." He moved closer, stopping a few steps away from her. "You heard every council meeting. Every conversation. Every strategy." "I did." He studied her face carefully. "Why?" Kira folded her arms loosely across her chest. "You married me for convenience. A foreign wife who didn't understand the language made you appear harmless. It made your enemies underestimate you. I was useful that way. You could have told me. You never asked." The silence stretched between them. "I didn't lie," she continued calmly. "I simply allowed people to believe what they wanted. You understood my business." "Yes." "You understood the risks." "Yes." "And you stayed." Her eyes softened slightly. "I stayed." He paced once across the room, then turned back to her. "Marcus Song." She nodded. "He has been testing the syndicate for months," she said. "Pushing small boundaries. Probing for weakness. Watching how the council reacts. You've been tracking that?" "For 2 years." His brows tightened. 2 years. I observed supply shifts. Loyalty patterns. The way certain lieutenants hesitated when he entered a room. He has been trying to destabilize you quietly. And tonight? Tonight he wanted to humiliate you publicly. To show the council you chose a weak wife. Jin Woo stared at her. "You studied my power structure," he said slowly. "Yes." "You mapped the hierarchy." "Yes." "You analyzed my enemies." "Yes." "And you said nothing. You did not trust me enough to ask for my opinion." The words were not bitter. They were simply honest. He stepped closer again. "Who are you?" Kira held his gaze. "Before I came to Korea, I was a tactical instructor for the United States Army." The admission shifted the air in the room. "I trained special operations units," she continued. "Close combat. Counter-surveillance. Strategic planning." He absorbed that quietly. "That's why you moved the way you did tonight." "Yes." "That was not luck." "No." She walked past him and poured herself a glass of water from the kitchen counter. Her movements were steady. "I reported my commanding officer for sexual assault," she said without emotion. "He was protected. His father was a senator. The investigation disappeared. My career did too." Jin Woo's hands slowly curled into fists at his sides. "They discharged me dishonorably," she continued. "They made sure no private security firm would hire me. Then the threat started. Subtle at first. Then more direct." "And you left the country?" "Yes." "For survival?" "Yes." The simplicity of her answers made the truth heavier. "Give me his name," Jin Woo said quietly. She looked at him for a long moment. "No." The refusal was calm but firm. "I can destroy him," Jin Woo said. "I have resources." "That is my past," she replied. "I survived it. I will not rebuild my life around revenge." His jaw tightened. She stepped closer to him. "I am not asking you to fight my old battles. I am asking about our future." "Our future?" Yes. We married for convenience. I know. And now? She met his eyes without hesitation. Now we decide if we continue pretending to be strangers who share an address, or if we become partners. The word lingered between them. Equal partners, she added. He studied her face. There was no fear there. No manipulation. Only clarity. You protected my reputation tonight, he said. I protected both of us. You could have exposed me at any time. Yes. But you didn't. No. He exhaled slowly. I underestimated you. You did. I assumed you wanted distance. I assumed you preferred control. Their honesty felt unfamiliar but not uncomfortable. If we do this, he said carefully, there are no secrets. I agree. You speak freely. I will. You advise openly. I will. And you stand beside me. I always have. He raised his hand slowly, stopping before touching her. May I? The question hung in the air. She nodded once. His fingers brushed her cheek gently. Her skin was warm beneath his touch. She did not pull away. The tension between them shifted. Not explosive. Not rushed. Something steady. Recognizing. You are not decoration, he said quietly. No. You are not weakness. No. You are dangerous. A faint smile touched her lips. So are you. For the first time since the gala, something close to relief entered his expression. Then we stop pretending, he said. Yes. We move forward together. Yes. As equals. Yes. They stood there, close but not desperate. Calm but not distant. Two people who had hidden for 3 years. Two people choosing something different. Jin-Woo lowered his hand slowly but did not step away. From now on, he said, you are not a mask. And you are not alone, she replied. They did not need to say more. They had reached an agreement. Not out of necessity, but by choice. The morning after their agreement, Kira did not sleep late. At exactly 10 o'clock, she walked into Café Magnolia. The café was small but elegant, with tall windows and white walls. The smell of roasted coffee beans filled the air. She chose a table near the window. The same table she would choose every day after that. She ordered a caramel latte and a slice of almond cake. Then she opened a romance novel and began to read. From the outside she looked harmless. A quiet foreign wife enjoying her morning coffee. But she was watching. She noticed the man across the street pretending to check his phone for too long. She saw the black sedan parked half a block away. She memorized faces, clothes, posture. She noted which vehicles changed drivers every few hours. She returned the next day. And the next. By the end of the week, she had confirmed what she suspected. Marcus Song had assigned 3 rotating watchers. They followed her at a careful distance. They never approached. They reported every movement. Kira allowed it. Each day she shifted her routine slightly. 5 minutes earlier. 10 minutes later. A different book. A different drink. The watchers adjusted too. Patterns began to form. She recorded everything in a small notebook she kept hidden inside her purse. On the 4th day she noticed something more important. A plain-looking man in his 40s met briefly with one of Marcus's watchers behind a newspaper stand. They did not speak long. But the exchange was clear. A police badge flashed discreetly. Corruption. She followed the detective from a safe distance and confirmed his identity later that night through public records. He had a history of internal complaints that were quietly dismissed. Marcus had an inside source. That information alone was valuable. But Kira did not stop there. She began tracking Marcus's finances through indirect channels. She reviewed shipment records and supply contracts. She studied port activity. She asked careful questions through business contacts without revealing intent. The numbers told a story. Marcus was losing money. His Chinese suppliers had withdrawn contracts. 3 of his lieutenants had resigned suddenly. 2 warehouses sat empty. Desperation was visible in his spending. Large withdrawals. Short-term contractors. Cash transfers to foreign accounts. He was preparing something. On the 7th day she found it. The Harbor Moon Festival. The largest public event of the year. Thousands of civilians. Fireworks. Music. Chaos. Perfect cover for violence. She brought her findings to the Biko Syndicate's underground conference room that evening. The council members sat around a long black table. Some watched her with curiosity. Others with doubt. Jin-Woo stood at the head of the table, silent. Kira placed photographs, vehicle numbers, and financial charts in front of them. 3 rotating surveillance teams, she said calmly. One corrupt detective feeding information. Reports filed every 48 hours. Minjun leaned forward. You confirmed this? Yes. She pointed to another document. Marcus has lost significant revenue. He cannot afford a prolonged power struggle. He needs a decisive strike. When? One council member asked. During the Harbor Moon Festival. The room grew quiet. Why then? Another man questioned. Fireworks will mask gunshots. Crowds create confusion. Escape routes are limited. Jean Wu's expression did not change. Target? You. The word settled heavily in the room. Kira continued, he will likely use outside contractors. His own men are no longer fully loyal. A murmur spread around the table. So what do you suggest? Minjun asked. Kira straightened. We let him think he has an advantage. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. We feed false information through the corrupt detective, she said. We create a believable vulnerability. He moves. We capture him in the act. Jean Wu's jaw tightened. No. All eyes turned to him. You are not bait, he said firmly. I am not bait, she replied calmly. I am part of the strategy. I will not place you in danger. You are already in danger, she said quietly. This approach minimizes civilian risk and prevents a wider war. The council fell silent. Jean Wu walked toward her slowly. There must be another way. There is, she answered. But it involves retaliation and casualties. The weight of her words was clear. After a long pause he spoke again. We adjust the plan. She nodded once. We increase security, he continued. We control the environment. You will not stand alone. I never intended to, she replied. The compromise was accepted. The council meeting ended with clear assignments and timelines. Later that night, Kira stepped onto the penthouse balcony. The air was cool. The city lights shimmered below. Jean Wu joined her a moment later. You moved through that room like you belonged there, he said. I do, she replied softly. He stood beside her. Not touching. Not distant. I don't like the risk, he admitted. I understand. But I trust your analysis. That is enough. They remained quiet for a moment. You were right about Marcus, he added. Yes. You've been studying him for weeks. Yes. And you didn't tell me until now. I was waiting until you were ready to hear it. He looked at her carefully. I am, he said. She met his gaze. Something shifted between them. Not strategy. Not power. Something personal. He reached for her slowly, giving her time to step away. She did not. His hand brushed her waist gently. She stepped closer. The first real kiss between them was not rushed. It was deliberate. Come. A quiet acknowledgement of everything changing. When they separated, neither spoke immediately. This is not just business anymore, he said quietly. No, she agreed. I am beginning to care about more than strategy. So am I. He exhaled slowly. Tomorrow we finalize the festival operation, he said. Yes. They stood together, looking out over the city that would soon test them. The plan was set. The trap was prepared. The Harbor Moon Festival would decide everything. The afternoon was calm when Kira left the private dress fitting. The tailor had finished adjusting the emerald hanbok she would wear to the Harbor Moon Festival. The fabric shimmered under the lights as she inspected it one last time. Satisfied, she changed back into her simple black dress and heels and stepped out into the underground parking garage. The air inside the garage was cool and quiet. Her heels echoed softly against the concrete floor. She carried a garment bag over one shoulder and her purse in the other hand. Halfway to her car, the lights went out. The entire garage dropped into darkness. Kira stopped walking. Her breathing slowed. Silence pressed in around her. Then she heard it, movement. Not random. Coordinated. 4 sets of footsteps. Professional. The first man appeared from behind a concrete pillar. Tactical gear. No hesitation in his stride. Another emerged to her left. 2 more stepped out from the shadows behind her. They had boxed her in. Marcus sends his regards, the leader said calmly in Korean. His accent was not local. Eastern European, perhaps. Kira dropped the garment bag. She slipped off her heels in one smooth motion. Then she moved. The first attacker reached for his sidearm. She closed the distance before he could draw it. Her hand locked onto his wrist. She twisted sharply, forcing the joint in the wrong direction. The weapon fell. She used his own momentum to drive his skull into the nearest concrete pillar. He dropped instantly. The second man rushed her from the side. She pivoted, drove her elbow into his solar plexus, and followed with a sharp strike to his throat. When he bent forward gasping for air, she grabbed his collar and slammed his face into her rising knee. 2 down. The third attacker pulled a knife. The fourth extended a metal baton. They moved together, trained and synchronized. Kira adjusted her stance. The man with the knife lunged first. She stepped aside at the last second, caught his wrist mid-thrust, and redirected the blade toward the fourth attacker. The knife sliced into the baton wielder's thigh. He screamed and fell. The third attacker hesitated for half a second. That was enough. Kira struck his throat with precise force. Not lethal. Just enough to disable. He collapsed, choking and disoriented. The entire fight lasted 47 seconds. Breathing heavily, Kira stepped back and scanned the area. All 4 men were down. 1 groaning. 1 unconscious. 1 clutching his throat. 1 bleeding from the thigh. Her hands trembled slightly now that the danger had passed. Then she felt it. A sharp sting along her forearm. The knife had grazed her during the struggle. It was not deep, but it was bleeding. She retrieved her phone and dialed. Jin Woo answered immediately. "I'm fine," she said before he could speak. "But we need to accelerate the timeline." There was a brief silence on the other end. "Where are you?" he asked. She told him. He arrived within minutes. When the elevator doors opened and he stepped into the garage, his eyes went straight to the blood on her arm. His calm expression shattered. "You're hurt." "It's minor." He ignored her words and moved toward her quickly, his hands already checking her shoulders, her face, her waist for additional injuries. "I neutralized them," she said softly. "For contractors." "I can see that." His voice was tight. He guided her back to the penthouse without another word. Inside the bathroom, he carefully cleaned the shallow cut on her arm. His hands were steady but his jaw remained clenched. "If they had killed you," he said quietly, "I would have destroyed everything." She watched him as he wrapped the bandage. "I can handle myself," she replied gently. "I know," he said. "That's not the point." He stepped back slightly, his eyes searching her face. "I was terrified." The admission surprised both of them. Kira reached up and touched his cheek lightly. "I'm here," she said. His hand covered hers. "I love you." The words came without hesitation. Certain. She did not look shocked. "I know," she whispered. "I've loved you for months." His breath caught. "You have?" "Yes." She stepped closer. "I was waiting for you to catch up." Something in his expression shifted from fear to something deeper. He leaned down and kissed her. This kiss was different from the one on the balcony. It was not careful. It was not measured. It was relief. It was urgency. It was the release of 3 years of distance. His hands moved slowly, giving her space to stop him. She did not. She pulled him closer. He lifted her gently, carrying her toward his bedroom. Their bedroom now. He set her down carefully on the bed, his movements controlled despite the intensity in his eyes. There was no rush. No violence. Only closeness. Only trust. Every touch was deliberate. Every kiss carried emotion that had been buried for too long. When they finally lay side by side beneath the sheets, their breathing slowly returned to normal. Kira rested her head against his chest. His arm wrapped around her securely. The city lights glowed softly through the windows. His fingers traced slow circles along her back. "I should have seen you sooner," he murmured. "You see me now," she replied. He tightened his hold slightly. "Yes." The fear from the garage had faded, replaced by something steady and real. For the first time since their marriage began, there were no masks between them. No distance. No pretense. Only 2 people choosing each other fully. As exhaustion finally overtook them, Kira closed her eyes. Jin Woo pressed a soft kiss against her hair. They fell asleep together, fully united. Kira woke before sunrise. For a few quiet seconds she lay still, listening to the steady rhythm of Jin Woo's breathing beside her. The events of the previous night felt distant, almost unreal. The closeness, the confessions, the warmth of sleeping in the same bed without distance between them. Then his phone began to vibrate. Jin Woo opened his eyes immediately. He reached for the phone, scanning the screen. His expression changed. Focused. Alert. "Marcus, people are moving early," he said quietly. Kira pushed herself up on one elbow. "What happened?" "There's activity near the Harbor Moon Festival grounds. I need to coordinate with Minjun." He was already standing, pulling on his shirt, adjusting his watch. The shift from husband to crime lord was fast and practiced. Kira watched him. He walked back to the bed and pressed a brief kiss to her forehead. "I'll be back soon." Then he left. The door closed softly behind him. The room felt colder. Kira sat there for a long moment, staring at the empty space he had just occupied. Her chest tightened in a way she did not expect. She told herself it was logical. Of course he had to leave. The plan depended on preparation. The threat was real. But logic did not silence the old fear rising inside her. She had learned long ago that vulnerability often led to loss. Every time she had allowed herself to trust someone, something had been taken from her. Last night had been different. She had let him see everything. She had admitted love. She had allowed herself to believe she was safe. Now he was gone. A familiar voice whispered in her mind, "This is how it begins. Distance. Regret. Separation." She shook her head, trying to dismiss the thought. But the fear would not disappear. Without fully realizing why, she climbed out of bed and walked into the guest room at the end of the hallway. She stepped inside and closed the door. Then she locked it. The click echoed louder than it should have. She leaned back against the door, sliding down slowly until she sat on the floor. "This is ridiculous," she whispered to herself. But her hands were shaking. An hour later she heard footsteps in the hallway. A soft knock. "Kira." It was his voice. She did not answer. Another knock, gentler this time. Kira opened the door. "We should stay focused on Marcus," she called back, trying to steady her tone. "Last night was emotional. The festival is more important." There was silence on the other side. Then she heard the faint sound of him sitting down against the door. "I'm not leaving this hallway," he said quietly. Her throat tightened. "You don't understand," she replied. "I know how this goes. Intensity. Confession. Then distance. I left to handle security," he said calmly. "Not to run from you." She pressed her palm against the door. "Fear doesn't listen to logic," she whispered. "I know," he answered. His voice remained steady. "But I am not the men who hurt you. I am not the system that failed you. I am not leaving." Her eyes filled with tears she did not expect. "You say that now. I chose you 3 years ago," he continued. "Even when I didn't understand you. Now that I do, I am choosing you again." The hallway was quiet except for his breathing. "You are not a liability," he said. "You are my partner." The word settled inside her. "I had to leave this morning because there is a threat," he added. "Not because I regret last night." She closed her eyes. "I am afraid," she admitted finally. "So am I," he said. That surprised her. "I'm afraid something will happen to you," he continued. "I'm afraid of losing you. But fear doesn't mean we run." Silence stretched between them. Then he spoke again, softer this time. "Please open the door." Kira stood slowly. Her hand hovered over the lock for a second. Then she turned it. The door opened. Jinwoo was already rising to his feet. He pulled her into his arms without hesitation. She held on to him tightly, pressing her face against his chest. "I don't want to go back to being distant," she said. "We won't," he replied. "I don't want to hide." "You don't have to." He tilted her chin upward so she could see his face clearly. "We face this together," he said. She nodded. "Together," she agreed. They stayed like that for a moment longer, letting the tension fade. Then reality returned. "We need to finish preparations," she said. "Yes." They moved into the living room and reviewed final details of the festival plan. Security positions. Communication signals. Exit routes. Backup teams. There was no panic now. No doubt. Only clarity. By late afternoon both were dressed and ready. Kira adjusted the emerald hanbok carefully. Jinwoo straightened his formal jacket. They stood side by side near the entrance. "Ready?" he asked. "With you," she replied. He offered his hand. She took it. Together they walked out of the penthouse and toward the Harbor Moon Festival. The Harbor Moon Festival transformed the waterfront into a sea of light. Thousands of lanterns floated across the dark water. Strings of golden bulbs lined the docks. Music drifted through the air. Vendors called out to customers. Fireworks waited to be launched from barges farther out at sea. Families walked together. Couples laughed. The atmosphere was warm and bright. But beneath the celebration, tension moved quietly. Kira stepped onto the dock beside Jinwoo. She wore the emerald hanbok that had been prepared days earlier. Gold embroidery shimmered across the silk. The color deepened her skin tone and caught every light around her. Her posture was straight and confident. She did not look like decoration. She looked like royalty. Jinwoo wore traditional formal attire, dark and perfectly tailored. His hand rested lightly at her waist. His gaze scanned the crowd carefully, even as he greeted guests with calm courtesy. Whispers followed them. She broke a man's wrist at the gala. She speaks perfect Korean. She's not what we thought. Kira heard every word. At exactly 9 o'clock, as the first firework exploded overhead, Marcus Song appeared. He stepped onto the dock with 8 men behind him. His wrist was still bandaged. His face carried anger that had not faded since the gala. The noise of fireworks cracked above them, but the space around Marcus seemed to grow quiet. "Jinwoo," he called out loudly. "Enjoying the festival?" Jinwoo turned slowly. "Very much." Marcus's eyes shifted to Kira. "I see you brought your American wife." His tone was mocking but less confident than before. Kira stepped forward before Jinwoo could respond. "I came willingly," she said calmly. Marcus let out a sharp laugh. "You embarrassed me publicly." "You embarrassed yourself," she replied. The men behind Marcus shifted slightly, watching. "You think this is about pride?" Marcus snapped. "You cost me money. You interfered in my business." Kira held his gaze. "You lost your Chinese suppliers because someone offered them better terms. You lost 3 lieutenants because evidence of your embezzlement reached them first. Your warehouses stand empty. Your accounts are frozen." The fireworks burst again overhead, lighting her face in gold. "You orchestrated it," Marcus said slowly. "Yes." His jaw tightened. "You had no right. You tried to destabilize the syndicate." I responded. The crowd nearby began to notice the tension. "You are a woman playing in a world you don't understand," Marcus said coldly. "And you are a man who underestimated your opponent," she answered evenly. Marcus's hand moved toward the knife at his belt. The motion was fast, but Kira was faster. He lunged toward her, blade aimed forward. She stepped aside smoothly, catching his wrist mid-strike. Her grip was precise, firm. She applied pressure to his radial nerve. His fingers spasmed. The knife slipped and clattered against the dock. But Marcus was larger and desperate. He tried to use his weight to overpower her, pushing forward aggressively. They struggled near the edge of the dock, water dark beneath them. Marcus drove his shoulder into her, attempting to knock her backward. Kira adjusted her footing at the last second. She hooked her leg behind his knee while redirecting his upper body sideways. His balance shifted instantly. With controlled force she pushed. Marcus stumbled backward into 2 of his own men. All 3 crashed to the dock in a tangle of limbs. Before they could recover, sirens wailed. Police vehicles surrounded the festival grounds. Officers moved in quickly, controlled and organized. Several approached Marcus directly. "We have a warrant for your arrest," one officer announced. Marcus struggled to stand. "On what grounds?" "Attempted murder. Assault. Financial crimes. Conspiracy." Documents were presented. Clear evidence. Transaction records. Surveillance photographs. Testimonies. Marcus's face drained of color as he recognized the details. He looked at Kira. "You destroyed me," he said quietly. She shook her head once. "You destroyed yourself the moment you mistook patience for weakness." Officers pulled his hands behind his back and secured the handcuffs. His men were detained within minutes. The festival crowd watched in shock as Marcus was led away. The power shift was undeniable. Within hours, news spread through the underworld. Marcus's accounts were seized. His remaining allies distanced themselves. His organization fractured immediately. By midnight, it no longer existed as a threat. The fireworks continued, but the mood had changed. Jinwoo stepped toward Kira slowly. There was no hesitation in his movement. No distance. He placed both hands gently on her waist. "You were magnificent," he said quietly. "We were prepared," she replied. He studied her face carefully. Then, without caring who watched, he kissed her. It was not rushed. Not hidden. It was public and certain. The crowd around them murmured, but no one looked away. This was no longer a marriage of convenience. This was a partnership. His equal. His strength. And as the final firework burst across the sky, lighting the harbor in brilliant gold, Jinwoo held her closer. Not as decoration. Not as protection. But as his partner in full view of the world. 3 months later, the same grand ballroom that once echoed with shock now carried a different energy. Crystal chandeliers glowed above polished marble floors. Soft music played in the background. The room was filled with business leaders, council members, and international partners. But this time, the whispers were not about scandal. They were about respect. Kira walked across the ballroom wearing a crimson silk gown. The fabric flowed smoothly around her, elegant and confident. A diamond choker rested at her throat, no longer just a symbol of status but of belonging. She moved with ease through small groups of powerful men and women, greeting them in flawless Korean, shifting to English when needed, even speaking brief phrases in Mandarin during negotiations. No one doubted her now. At the far end of the room, the Biko Syndicate Council gathered around a long table. Documents were spread before them. Charts, contracts, shipping proposals. Kira stood at the head of the table, explaining her strategy clearly. The port expansion will increase our trade capacity by 30% within a year, she said. If we secure direct contracts with these suppliers, we reduce reliance on unstable middle networks. One council member nodded thoughtfully. And the risk? We control logistics internally. That reduces exposure. Her voice was calm, firm, informed. Minjun, who once watched her with quiet skepticism, now leaned back with approval. The vote passed unanimously. When the meeting ended, several council members approached her directly to ask for further details. They no longer looked past her to Jin Woo. They addressed her as an equal. Across the room, Jin Woo watched everything. He held a glass of champagne, but he had forgotten to drink it. His eyes followed her movements without shame or concealment. His wife commanded attention effortlessly. Not because she demanded it, because she earned it. Hannah, his sister, approached him with a small smile. You're staring. I'm appreciating, he replied calmly. Hannah laughed softly. You look proud. I am. Kira finished her conversation and glanced across the room. Their eyes met instantly. The smile she gave him was private and warm. He crossed the ballroom without hesitation. Dance with me, he said quietly, offering his hand. She placed her hand in his. They moved to the center of the floor as the music shifted to something slower. He placed one hand at her waist. She rested her hand on his shoulder. They moved together easily, naturally. You handled the council well, he murmured. So did you, she replied. He shook his head slightly. They listened because of you. They listened because we rebuilt stability. He looked down at her thoughtfully. You've transformed everything. She smiled gently. We did. The music continued, soft and steady. There's something I need to tell you, she said quietly. His arms tightened slightly around her. Good or bad? Good. She stepped back just enough to meet his eyes clearly. I'm pregnant. The world seemed to pause for a second. His expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something bright and overwhelming. Are you certain? Yes. A slow smile spread across his face. Are you happy? She asked softly. He laughed under his breath. Happy is not enough. He pulled her closer again, his joy unmistakable. You've given me more than I ever expected, he said. A real partnership. A future. The music continued around them, but their moment felt separate from the room. He released her hand suddenly and stepped back. Then, without hesitation, he lowered himself to one knee. The ballroom fell silent. Every conversation stopped. He reached into his jacket and removed a small velvet box. Kira stared at him, stunned. He opened the box slowly. Inside was an emerald ring surrounded by diamonds. The stone matched the color she once wore on a night that changed everything. We married for convenience, he said clearly. We built trust slowly. We fell in love unexpectedly. He looked up at her with steady certainty. I want to marry you again. Not for arrangement. Not for protection. But because I love you. Tears filled her eyes. Because you are my equal, he continued. My partner. The mother of my child. Will you marry me again? She nodded before he could even finish. Yes. He stood and slid the ring onto her finger beside her original band. Applause filled the ballroom. But in that moment, neither of them heard it. A few months later, they stood in a traditional Korean wedding ceremony. This time it was not quiet or strategic. It was celebrated. Kira wore a beautifully embroidered hanbok. Jin Woo stood proudly beside her. Family and allies surrounded them. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, there was no doubt about what they were. Not convenience. Not politics. Well, they bowed together. They smiled together. And when they walked out of the ceremony side by side, it was clear to everyone present. They were officially remarried for love. 1 year later, the city looked different. Or maybe it was Kira who had changed. The sun was just beginning to rise over Bususan, turning the sky from deep blue to soft gold. The early morning air was cool and quiet. From the balcony of their penthouse, the harbor stretched wide and calm below. Kira stood barefoot against the glass railing, holding her daughter close to her chest. The baby stirred gently, wrapped in a soft white blanket. She had dark eyes like her father and warm brown skin like her mother. Thick curls rested against her tiny forehead. She was small, perfect, and deeply loved. Jinwoo stepped onto the balcony behind them. He wrapped his arms around both of them, careful and protective. One hand rested gently on the baby's back. "Is she awake?" he asked softly. "Almost," Kira replied with a smile. The baby made a small sound and shifted slightly in her mother's arms. Jinwoo leaned down and pressed a light kiss to his daughter's head. Then he kissed Kira's temple. For a long moment they stood together without speaking. The world below them was beginning to wake. Cars moved slowly along distant streets. Fishing boats prepared to leave the harbor. Life continued. "Do you remember the first time we stood here?" Jinwoo asked quietly. Kira nodded. "I felt like a guest in this city," she said. "Like I was hiding. You were surviving." "Yes." She looked down at their daughter. "I didn't think I would ever feel safe again." He tightened his arms slightly. "You are more than safe now," he said. She turned her head slightly to look at him. "I used to think strength meant standing alone," she admitted. "That I had to handle everything by myself." "And now?" he asked. "Now I know strength can also mean standing beside someone who chooses you every day." He smiled at that. "You chose me too," he reminded her. "I did." She shifted the baby gently as the small eyes began to open. Their daughter blinked slowly at the morning light. "She'll grow up in a different world," Jinwoo said. "Yes," Kira agreed. "A stable one." They had spent the past year rebuilding more than just power. The syndicate had become more structured. Fewer risks, stronger alliances, clearer rules. Kira had not remained in the background. She helped guide negotiations, restructure trade agreements, and strengthen internal systems. Her presence was no longer questioned. She did not hide her intelligence. She did not soften her voice. She did not pretend to be less than she was. And Jinwoo never asked her to. "Do you regret anything?" he asked quietly. She thought for a moment. "I regret the fear," she said honestly. "The time I spent believing I had to shrink myself to survive." He nodded. "You don't shrink," he said. "No," she agreed softly. "I don't." The baby made a small cry and Kira rocked her gently. Jinwoo watched them both with quiet pride. "You built something here," he said. "We built it," she corrected gently. "You changed this empire," he insisted. She smiled. "I stopped running," she said. "That made the difference." The sun rose higher, casting warm light over the balcony. The city below them shimmered in gold. 4 years earlier she had arrived in Korea carrying fear and silence. She had entered a marriage that felt like a contract. She had hidden her strength because she believed that was the safest choice. But safety had not come from hiding. It had come from partnership, from trust, from standing openly beside someone who respected her. She looked at their daughter again. "I want her to know she never has to shrink," Kira said. "She won't," Jinwoo replied. They stood there together as the day fully broke. Not as strangers, not as an arrangement, but as a family. A husband, a wife, a child. The future waited below them, uncertain as always. But it no longer felt threatening. It felt possible. Jinwoo placed his hand over Kira's where it rested on their daughter's back. "Ready?" he asked. She looked at him, then at their child, then at the brightening city. "With you," she answered. They remained there for a few more quiet seconds, breathing in the morning air. She had stopped running. She had stopped hiding. She had built a life, a partnership, and an empire beside the man who chose her fully. And now, together, they faced the future as a family. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories.